right. And go.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Robust American Love. My name is Karen Karbiener, and I am president of the Walt Whitman Initiative, a 501c3 nonprofit organization whose mission is to celebrate New York's literary legacy and be a touchstone for cultural activism. Please follow us on Instagram and also Facebook and Twitter, and tune into our YouTube channel to explore more presentations in our Robust American Love speaker series. If you like what we're doing, there are many ways to help us out. This is an entirely volunteer organization, so we appreciate your support very much. And you can visit our Support Us button at our waltwhitmaninitiative.org website. We decided to offer this speaker series, note the word speaker, not lecture, to present timely public-facing conversations on Whitman's life, work, and legacy. You will hear presentations from all sorts of people: teachers, poets, grad students, artists, printers, neighborhood activists, and today, absolutely wonderful musicians and singers and composers. They're not designed to be academic talks, but they're free, open, informal discussions that we end by inviting your questions for a Q&A with our speakers. So if you're watching right now on YouTube, please post your questions into the chat section. And if you're missing this, if you're seeing it later, that's great. You can always view it later. Check out our waltwhitmaninitiative.org website for a record of all of our Robust American Love speaker series. Now, a couple of things here. These shows would absolutely not take place without the support of some incredible people who are in the background of the show. And numero uno is Jesse Morandi, the vice president of the Walt Whitman Initiative, who is manning, or I should say, holding forth, pulling us all together today, and is also responsible for our website. And I'm going to take you guys over to the website. Sorry about my throat here. And I'm going to share my screen just to show you how beautiful and how big this thing has become. There's a couple of things on here that I just wanted to call attention to. Of course, on the left, we have our Robust American Love speaker series. As you can see, you can always see events that have taken place or take a look at what is to come. Very excited about our next presentation on June 22nd, which is a roundtable on saving 99 Ryerson Street. Now, many of you know that one of the things that this organization has been trying very hard to do for almost 5 years is to preserve and hopefully landmark Whitman's single standing home in New York City, out of over 30 that he lived in during his time here in the city. He also finished Leaves of Grass, the first edition in this house, and Emerson went to visit him. He had his first literary pilgrims, and he really became himself as an artist while living in this house. Why isn't it landmark yet? Come and visit this wonderful panel that we have with folks from the NYC LGBT Historic Sites Project. We've got Brad Vogel on, who is a historic preservationist, and I'm very excited about that. You can see also that we're planning way ahead. July 13th, very excited to have Tim Cusack and Patrice Miller on for Cruising Daddy on the Street, I Ping the Body Electric, and Queer Artistic Lineages. More on that coming up, but you can always check out the description that is at our website. And also on the right, I just want you to take note of our incredible Song of Myself Marathon poster for our 18th annual Song of Myself Marathon reading. The design here is by Caitlin Shea, and we give her a shout out at our initiatives link. If you want to learn more about her, just go back up here and look at the Song of Myself Marathon initiative. She won our poster contest with this incredible, cheerful, very interesting portrait of Walt Whitman. And we're excited to have it on the poster. You can see here also links to read at the marathon. And you can also just sign up to listen at the marathon. Jesse just installed an incredible marathon poster gallery, so you can see over our 18-year history how we have looked. So please do take a look at that as well. And then finally, a couple of things. On the right here, you'll see a sign up for the Walt Whitman newsletter. This is a brand new thing for us, and I have to thank our board member, Dee Quee. Hey, Dee, I know you're listening. She is an amazing force for good, and she's the one who really organized this initiative to put a newsletter together. So please do sign up. Every month, I promise we won't bother you for more than once a month. We have all sorts of features here, talk a bit about our people who are coming to on our Robust American Love speaker series, any sort of events that we're hosting, the Susan Jane Jaffete Memorial Fellowship. I want to encourage people to look at that, especially if you are in grad school or you are a professor and you are teaching a grad student who is interested in Whitman. Susan Jaffete, who is a dear friend of this organization and a major Whitman collector, got us started on offering this incredible opportunity for public-minded scholarship. So please do take a look. And we love this poster that was designed by our intern, Razy Neumann. So thank you, Razy, for that fun poster. And just scrolling down here to show you what's up with us, we would love to have you guys, just be part of our community. So please do sign up for the newsletter and you'll see all sorts of really nifty stuff. Not all about Whitman, right? But poetry related and often New York based, but not always, as you see with Paul Salveson's book from England. So all sorts of things up there and all sorts of things to offer today as well. I'm really, really excited, everyone, about who we have on our show today. And as you know, this is Paula Kimper, who is coming on. And Paula, I'm going to welcome you to put on your screen so that we can connect with you. And also with her today is Nathaniel Sullivan, who's a noted baritone. Paula, thank you so much for coming to the show today.
Thank you, Karen, for the invitation. I'm so happy to be here with you.
And I haven't seen Paula since last Song of Myself marathon, when she and her partner Elaine did an incredible rendition of, which section was it again, Paula?
Section 18.
Okay, so unbelievable. And she brings with her today Nathaniel Sullivan. And Nathaniel, if you wouldn't mind putting on your screen. Here he is. Nathaniel, thank you so much for coming today. This is such a treat.
I'm so happy to be here. I'm so glad that you invited me to be here tonight.
Okay, I need to do a bit of an introduction for folks who don't know who you all are. They need to know. Paula is a graduate of Eastman School of Music, and she's a composer of opera, theater, dance, film, and song. So she's got a massive amount of wonderful things that she has done, especially opera is the thing, I guess, that really interests me. Paula, I have notes about your first opera, Patience and Sarah, which was based on a famous novel about a lesbian couple. I think in the 19th century, was that?
Yes. 18,
right.
17, they were active.
A really important book. And this opera broke ground as far as LGBT matter in the opera, which is not generally regarded as a place where you see a lot of LGBT or even female leads. So Patience and Sarah, it premiered at the Lincoln Center Festival in New York City in 1998. And then was revived, I guess, revival of the opera in 2016 at the Off-Broadway Players Theatre in New York City, received subsequent productions in Chicago by the Third Eye Theatre Ensemble in 2018, and in New York City at the Hunter College Opera Theatre in 2019. In addition to that opera, Paula has written The Captivation of Eunice Williams, which appeared at the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian in DC. And it also toured the Balkan region. That's something we should talk about. That's very interesting, in 2008. Truth, an American opera about Sojourner Truth, appeared in the New York International Fringe Festival in 2013 and at Riverside Theatre inside Historic Riverside Church in 2014. Kimper was an inaugural participant in Columbia University's Community Scholars Program. Here is a Place was commissioned by OPERA America for the OPERA America Songbook to commemorate the 2012 opening of the National Opera Center in New York City. One Art was commissioned by soprano Laure Meloy, who created the one-woman opera cabaret based on Elizabeth Bishop's life, and most recently performed it at the Tête Opera Festival 2019 in London, England. So there's all sorts of wonderful stuff. And I guess the touchstone for us, of course, Paula, is Melody Book for Song of Myself. Paula has been writing, I should say, setting every single section of the 52 sections of Song of Myself to music. She's going to talk with us today about her progress on that, and we're actually going to hear some of the sections. Some of you may remember I promised a Song of Myself sing-along. Well, guess what? It's really going to happen. And the reason is because Nathaniel Sullivan is going to lead us in section 5. So let me just say a few words about Nathaniel, who is absolutely amazing, not just as a musician. He's a theater artist as well as a writer. And he's devoted to holding space for reflection, understanding, and creative projects that champion change. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Nathaniel conceived and self-produced the I'm going to say it wrong, you know, Nathaniel, oh my gosh, Pandemigram. Did I do it? Project, Pandemigram, Pandemigram, raising over $7,500 for 43 different charitable organizations. He looks forward to continued collaborations that make meaningful contributions to his communities. Connect with Nathaniel and read his written reflections at nathanielsullivan.com. Nathaniel, you are doing amazing work out there. We love to hear work for the public good, and you are certainly going to do that for us today because you're going to open us up to section 5 of Song of Myself. Are there any words that you need to say before you sing this, or should we just let it wash over us?
I think we should just let it wash over us and let Paula's beautiful melody speak for itself and Whitman's beautiful words speak for themselves.
Okay, so thank you. And viewers out there, you're going to be treated because Paula is going to put her music up on the screen. And Paula, I'm going to invite you to share your screen with the audience. So as you all see on the left of your screen, you have her actual musical setting for Song of Myself number 5. And on the right in a moment, because we all are going to turn off our cameras except for Nathaniel, so he will be spotlighted. And those of you that are watching, you know that you can manipulate that little 2-line division between the two sides of the screen. So if you want to see more of Nathaniel, you can move that line over to the left and just enjoy the piece, or you can put the music really big and of course either mute yourself or just belt it out. Especially if you can read music, we invite you to join in singing the song of yourself. So Nathaniel, without further ado, we're going to let you show us Walt Whitman.
I believe in you, my soul. The other I am must not abase itself to you, and you must not be abased to the other. Loaf with me on the grass, loose the stop of your throat. Not words, not music or rhyme I want, not custom or lecture, not even the best. Only the lull I lie once we lay, such a transparent summer morning, how you settled your head athwart my hips, and gently turned over upon me, and parted the shirt from my bosom bone, and plunged your tongue to my bare stripped heart, and reached till you felt my beard, and reached till you held my feet. Swiftly arose and spread around me the peace and knowledge that pass all the argument of the earth. And I know that the hand of God is the promise of my own. And I know that the Spirit of God is the brother of my own, and that all the men ever born are also my brothers, and the women my sisters and lovers. And that a kelson of the creation is love, and limitless, limitless, are leaves stiff or drooping in the fields, and brown ants in the little wells beneath them, and mossy scabs of the worm fence, heaped stones, elder, mullein, and poke weed.
Wow. Oh my gosh. How could we not go crazy for that? That was stupendous. I mean, I have heard that section many, many times, but never like that. It sounds like it comes right from the heart, Nathaniel. Can I just ask, have you actually studied Walt Whitman? Are you a Whitman aficionado at all?
I am not a Whitman aficionado. I'm going to put my headphones on here so I can hear you a little better. No, I am not a Whitman aficionado. I've studied Whitman, to the extent of his song settings, and then diving into, or settings of his poetry, I should say, song settings of his poetry, and just the research, surrounding that. But I would not deign to call myself a Whitman aficionado in the presence of true Whitman aficionados. So, but.
Well, anyone is invited, and I certainly think that you are communicating something very soulful and deep about this passage. And I actually found it funny that you paused at that particular moment, because it's a very sexy part of the poem.
Yeah.
Like there's all sorts of things. My 10-year-old daughter is listening, so I'm not going to go nuts on this, but there's so many things that have been read into that particular sequence that are very juicy. So your pause was sort of like a lovely little blush kind of entering into that section.
Well, that's very generous. It certainly wasn't that I forgot the words in that moment. So beautiful.
And Paula, I had a question for you while Nathaniel is still with us here. I noticed that you're very true to Whitman's language, except one place you repeated a word, and that was limitless. So I wanted to ask you about that kind of, that slight change, it doesn't do a lot, but that shows that you are really thinking about Whitman's language and maybe shaping it into something a little bit different for your own purposes. Do you have any words about that particular change?
Well, I think overall, Song of Myself is about letting go of limits, and that Whitman was becoming universal over the course of this entire poem, the epic poem. And so occasionally I do pick something that's really, really key to the overall intent and repeat it.
So there aren't a lot of liberties that you take as far as that goes, but every now and then there's a moment where you feel that an emphasis must be made.
Yes, that's true.
And I think
I was going to say, in the first one that I set, which is Song of Myself, the number 6, section 6, a child said, "What is the grass?" Because that was the first one, I did a lot more repeating in that one toward the end, when nothing dies, all goes onward and outward, nothing collapses. I repeat that several times. But then I think a certain economy came across me in my writing, where I wanted to be true to the poems and not be too indulgent musically with just letting the singer repeat. So, and I've also worked with a publisher on this particular section 5, and he came back to me with all kinds of corrections because there were little things that I did. For instance, I didn't capitalize every line that he did, and because when you're singing, you're more reading it in a prose format than when you're reading it in a poetry format. And so in order to make the interpretation of the singer a little bit more direct, I took out some of those capital letters, like you're not really starting again. This list goes on for 4 pages, or whatever. So you're continuing thoughts or like that. But he corrected all of those, and I let him do it because he's doing the publishing of that. And I don't mind being true to it. And then just as a composer and as I'm learning the poems myself, sometimes my brain will shift a word or shift a phrase, and I'll add a word or change something. And I have to be very meticulous about going through the originals to make sure that I haven't changed Whitman inadvertently. So, but when I repeated Limitless, I really meant it.
I think that's fascinating, especially knowing Whitman as a poet of revision himself.
Yes.
He was constantly revising, constantly shaping and changing the poem. And I don't think he would have been averse to people actually making it their own in some way. So Nathaniel, I want to thank you for doing that, for bringing us into Whitman in such an incredible poetic way. And if you like, you're invited to just sit back and listen and turn off your screen. No pressure.
I certainly will. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you.
And just a teaser that we will have another singer interpreting Paula's beautiful work. Actually, her partner, Elaine Valby, is going to join us at the end of this program and do her version of section 15, right? 17, I'm sorry, 17, which happens to be, I think, a favorite of yours, Paula. Yeah. So we're very excited about that. But I really want to dig into things with you, Paula. There's so many ways to go with this, but why don't we just start a little bit kind of at the beginning? I'm just wondering how all of this happened. How does one become a composer, especially someone who's really interested in the relationship between poetry and song?
Yes. Well, I think it's a mystery how one becomes a composer. And as a kid, I always heard music in my head. And I took piano lessons. My mother played piano, my grandmother played piano, and I studied. But I would sit there and I would just make up the little tunes, try to get the tunes out of my head. And I was very shocked when I learned that other people didn't hear the music in their head. And I would say, just sing the tune you have in your head. They didn't have a tune in their head. And so I realized early on that it was a gift and that it's mysterious, but there's something in my brain that takes words in particular and through repetition begins to create melodies and rhythms with them. And so that is really what led me to want to be a composer, particularly of songs. And as a kid, I got a guitar and I started writing songs. And they're very teenage, but my high school band director said, if you want to be a songwriter, you got to write 100 songs first, which was great advice, daunting at the time, but great advice. And so I set out to do that. And I learned a lot about song form, and I was really enamored of, Joni Mitchell, Paul Simon, James Taylor, Stevie Wonder, all the singers and songwriters of the day. And really, I wanted to do that for a living. I wanted to be a rock star. So, but turned out I couldn't really sing my own songs, and that's a detriment. And went into writing music for theater, and then the evolution of that became music for theater, which is opera. As a kid, I never thought I would write an opera. I thought it was just too many notes and too much work, and it was too long. I'm never going to do that. But I finally did run into a libretto that stimulated a part of my mind that said, hey, maybe this would make a good opera. So that was, I met Wendy Persons in 1989, and she had written a libretto to Patience and Sarah. And she said, oh, you're a composer. I wrote a libretto here. Set it to music. And at the time, you can see how times have changed. At the time, I said, I'm not doing that. It's a lesbian opera, and I don't want to be pigeonholed as a lesbian composer. But after a while, after a few years, I had become more immersed in opera. And in fact, I went to see the Ring Cycle. And in the middle of that long marathon of just that huge world that's created, I began to understand that that's what it takes to make an opera. You create its own world, sound-wise and story-wise. And I thought, oh yeah, let me look at that libretto again and let's see if we can do it. And that was the beginning, really, of creating that opera.
It's incredible because I'm a huge opera fan. I must tell you that my husband and I met taking Edward Said's opera class at Columbia. And
Wow.
we became huge fans of just going, the cheap seats at the Met, but we were there checking it out. But I'm a big fan also of the Ring Cycle, not politically, but just in terms of the sound and the experience is incredible. But I can't even imagine composing an opera just because
a long time.
Oh my gosh. Like I think somewhere you wrote that it's like having a baby, right? It's such a huge deal. And your relationship also with language, as you said, and maybe this has something to do with your teacher telling you to write songs. Not every musician goes that way, right? Like thinks about literature along with music.
Yes.
So
well, I love words, and I always have. And then at a certain point, I realized that writing the words was the hard part for me because the music part came naturally. And so I started to set other people's words. And then, then I could move ahead more quickly. And also, I've always been an opera fan. I grew up listening to the opera radio broadcasts on Saturday in my little tiny hometown in Central Square, New York, upstate, where no one had even heard of opera. And when I said I wanted to be composer, they didn't even know what I meant. They said, you mean you want to teach music?
Oh my gosh, you are Walt Whitman. You are Walt. That's such a Whitmanian story, right? Like, how does this son of an illiterate carpenter become America's poet, right? There was no idea of poetry in the house. So that's fascinating that it was not part of what you knew. And I think particularly I'm interested because I'm looking at the list of the names of the operas you've composed that I ran through at the beginning. And a couple of others like The Bridge of San Luis Rey, which is a Thornton Wilder novel. And that Captivation of Eunice Williams is apparently based on a story, right, from colonial America. Yes. So I can understand better using poetry as a basis for a connection with music, but you turn to prose quite a bit. So
I love drama, and I think that comes out of my work with theater. My dear friend Doug Moser, who is an opera director now because he directed Patience and Sarah. But he was a theater director that got me into writing music for theater. And I worked with him in the Boston Post Road Stage Company in Connecticut in the 80s. And we did music for 20 or 30 plays. And we had such a great collaboration. We could read each other's mind. I kept saying he would think about what the music was that he wanted, and I could hear it, and I could make it happen. And so when we were doing the Patience and Sarah, it was very natural for me to want him to be the director. So it all comes together. It's whether it's prose or poetry, even Whitman's basically prose in a lot of ways. It's not poems in the traditional sense where there's a rhyme or a couplet or a form that he follows. That was so freeing.
That's fascinating because Whitman wrote notes to himself right before he published Leaves of Grass. And we can see that he was thinking of a novel, maybe a play. Like he himself wasn't a confirmed poet at that time, right? He had written in the 1840s something like 22 or 23 kind of schlocky rhyming poems. So for him, poetry was also a question mark. So what is very cool talking to you is that you recognize that as a musician, that, you know, he's sort of, well, he's inventing something new, right? We call it free verse, but it has a spirit of poetry, but it has a story, as you would imagine, with prose. So I guess that's kind of a perfect fit for what you like to do.
Yeah, I think because he has so much internal rhyming, or the alliteration, the D, 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 B, 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 B. He uses the syllables again and again. And I think actually in libretti, for opera, that is better than rhyming. And Wagner does that a lot too. He'll hit on a certain syllable over and over again in a different context. And it creates its own sense of rhyme that isn't so blocked.
I think we saw that just looking at your music while Nathaniel was singing it, and realizing that you were finding internal patterns there just by the way that you broke up the notes. I think, you know, for the audience, that's especially the people really interested in Whitman's poetry, it's fascinating to see how you write music to those lines. I'm also interested, though, politically speaking, in what you've done to bring LGBT concerns and in general just women to a genre that doesn't really have a lot of that going on, right? I think the opera world is one of those worlds that we're kind of worried about at this point, right? Will it change with the times? I hope so. And I think certainly you're doing things to make that happen. But do you want to talk about that at all? Like the fact that you're kind of doing non-traditional things in a very traditional genre?
Yeah, I was intentional about that because as I said, I listened to all the classic operas as a kid, and I was even in a production of La Boheme when I was at Eastman School.
Wow.
I was in the stage band.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, but those operas all seemed old, old-fashioned, written by old white guys, and they never really satisfied me in terms of story because all the women were, they all died or were oppressed or whatever. And so I really saw that as a gaping hole that needed to be filled. And so I only would pick an opera with strong female characters, if not just leads, and with some sort of a political message involved. I mean, Patience and Sarah, to this day, is the only lesbian opera that has a happy ending.
Oh my gosh! Wow. It's not the only lesbian opera at this point.
Not. It's not. There's a new generation of young composers that are quite aware of my opera and are grateful. They have expressed their gratitude to me for blazing that trail and are making operas today that are politically forward-looking in that way. And I have to give a shout out to OPERA America because they have done a tremendous amount of work in the last 10 years. And I feel like I had Mark Skorka's ear a couple times and he said, well, what? Are women really being biased against? I said, it's hard to prove, but where are they? You know, so they have created a lot of programs to support female composers and their works and new productions. And now there's a whole generation of new young female composers out there writing operas, as well as young male composers writing operas that are more politically aware. So I don't think opera's in trouble, but I do think it's shifting in a good way.
And I think we have you to thank for a great deal of that new energy, and to work so responsibly. I have to ask this question, you know, just because I know that there are many artists listening. How did you manage to do that? What, you know, as a lot of people give in, right, to commercial or economic success, but it seems like you've really steered your career in a really socially responsible way. Do you have any advice for those of us out there that are, you know, that really are looking at you as a figure who's really been able to do this so well?
Well, find some other way to make money.
That's true. Did you do that?
Yeah. I'm a piano teacher, and I in the early days in New York, I did a whole slew of other jobs. I cleaned houses, I built things, I worked in gardens, I
Love it.
whatever it took, you know. And as things progressed, then we finally got that commission from American Opera Projects for Patience and Sarah, and so that really helped. And that was a really magical time where the community rallied around us. We had no idea it would have that kind of impact when we started out, but the whole LGBT community, it really rallied and paid for that opera and supported it and sold it out at Lincoln Center and has been supportive of that ever since. So I'm so grateful to everyone involved with that.
Oh my gosh, what a gorgeous, gorgeous story. Good things happening to good people. We all want to hear about that. And also just, you know, hearing about sometimes the drudge work that has to happen first before the beauty really just has a chance to blossom. So thank you for making it real for so many people.
Thank you.
I'm also just wondering about place, you know, just because I'm really interested as a native New Yorker, and I noticed that a lot of your work is very American. That's another, it must be intentional.
Well, I just think that's what I hear, and I am American. And even to the extent people, when they find out that I'm a composer, they say, you know, what language do you write them in?
Oh, right, of course. Good question.
You write Italian opera? Or, you know,
right.
I don't even say English. I say American. I write in the American language. And I grew up going to a Methodist church. My parents were very involved in the music and the choir, and hymn singing was a big part of my life. And I played the trumpet as a kid. And so band music and things like that are very much a part of my historic life of music. And that's what I hear. And also in the genre, it's European operas, and we need more American operas. So I really was intentional about wanting to tell American stories.
You are reminding me of the Whitman poem, I Hear America Singing.
Yeah.
Like you just quoted it, but in your own words. It's pretty amazing. I'm pretty convinced you're Walt Whitman, Paula, but
He's so deep in me, I just paraphrase.
Now, I know that you are calling in from Hawaii because we're all very jealous here at the Whitman Initiative. And
try not to rub it in, but yeah.
And you have not been there that long, right? Like you lived in Brooklyn before that.
I lived in Brooklyn initially, moved there in 1979 and lived there for 25 years. And then some friends had a place in Harlem, and they had a top floor and they had kids. So we moved into their top floor apartment, and I helped raise their kids because I work at home. And I don't know how parents do it who don't work at home. How do you take care of kids? So I spent a lot of time, you know, picking them up at school, taking them to things and bringing them home and feeding them and stuff like that. And then they grew up. And so we spent 15 years there. And then we were like, well, now what? Done everything in New York I want to do. And we visited Hawaii and we thought, oh my God, you can really live there? And so we decided to do it. And it took a while, but we really, we moved in 2019 and just thankfully missed the pandemic hitting New York. And as far as places to live out the pandemic, this has been really great.
I
If
have
you don't
some,
mind, I'm going to show you something.
oh,
Here.
please. Yeah, let's see.
If I just turn around like this, you can see my little garden.
Oh my gosh, it's
there.
gorgeous.
I
Oh,
know, it's my little garden.
okay.
And I love gardening. So, so great to be here and do that.
Yeah, well, that's definitely a luxury in Brooklyn. So, you know, you have moved up and on, and I can imagine that you're getting inspired every day by the beauty around you there. I mean, it's just so different, but for a composer, for an artist, it must be a magical place. But I do want to say, I know that you put down some really deep roots here because you really connected with a lot of the community. We've heard about that already today. But we personally share a very, very dear friend who we lost recently, Greg Trupiano. And I know many of you listening are remembering Greg, but if you did not hear his name before, Greg was a phenomenal community activist and supporter, and I don't know, brought music to so many people's lives. He started up something called the Walt Whitman Project. And Paula, I know that he commissioned you to write quite a few pieces. Do you want to talk a little bit about your relationship to Greg?
Well, I first met Greg through American Opera Projects because he was working there at the time. We did Patience and Sarah. And so we just continued to be really close friends. And as you know, making an opera takes a long time. So once that was done, he just continued to support my work. He continued to help me with all the other operas that I was writing. He would give me suggestions of people I could cast or people to contact to promote it, or people he knew in Chicago. You're doing it in Chicago? I know this list of people. Tell them about it. You know, things like that.
This is so Greg. He knows everybody, and he's also so generous about sharing.
Yes. Yeah. He had a ton of energy. He was always working, it seemed, but it was so joyful. So not like a workaholic work, but just so joyful and so energized and energizing. So yes, when he started that project, it really reawakened my own love of Whitman, because I hadn't really been reading the Leaves of Grass that much since I left college. But he started this event, and I was commissioned to do the inaugural fanfare for the start of the project. And that was a lovely, lovely event.
Do you remember what year that was?
2000 and, well, I think I have it here. Wait 1 second.
Because this goes way back.
It goes way back. October 14th, 2000.
Yeah, that's before I knew Greg, actually. That's when he started up the Whitman Project. Is that what you're saying?
That
Okay.
was when the inaugural event took place. And he knew I was a trumpet player. So he initially was commissioning me to write fanfares. And I did a lot of those. And then there was this event that was at the Zen Temple in Brooklyn. And that was in October of 2002. And for that, I decided to write the Song of Myself, number 6.
The beginning. Okay.
That
So
was the first one because I love that poem. So I wrote that one first. And because it was at the Zen Temple, I used this particular Tibetan bowl as a kind of a drone. So I could build up the sound and keep it going and then just have the song over it. And it was lovely. It was really lovely. And Greg then performed it several times in future events. And
I know I've heard it, and because the sound of that Zen bowl rings in my memory. I mean, it carries through, I think, the entirety of the section, right?
the whole section, yeah. It's a drone. It's basically a drone. And it supports all the different variations of the keys that go with it. So that was my first foray into Song of Myself. And then a few years later, after I had written the other operas and produced the operas. And it was around 2016. Once I had done the revision of Patience and Sarah and it was starting to have its own life, I decided I wanted to do something that wasn't opera, something completely different, and that was much more private and much more personal, just more like a meditation initially. I don't know if you remember Coleman Barks and his Rumi project.
Absolutely. I use it in my classes, actually. Oh, I'm sure you have a well-used copy. All right.
I do. It's marked, and it's all yellowed.
I put your copy of Leaves of Grass on Instagram because I was so impressed with how tattered. Oh, you have it up there too.
Yeah. This I got when I was 15 or something.
Oh my gosh.
Like, wow, this is amazing stuff.
Beautiful. I'm hoping my students who see how beautiful it is to own an actual book. Oh,
and then this one I use now. Thank you so much.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. But I had also always been fascinated. I don't know why, but excuse me, the Leaves of Grass, the 52 sections always connected with there's 52 weeks in a year. So in my mind, I always had that little voice saying, yeah, one for every week. And so that was part of the inspiration when I decided I would set them. And I did actually make that happen, sort of with the first half before we went into lockdown, to just present those as kind of a weekly gift.
Oh my gosh, I will never forget it, Paula. Wasn't it in 2019 though that you started giving weekly?
Yes, because it was the bicentennial year.
Right. Blew me away. And I mean, this is why we needed to have you on Robust American Love, because I think everybody was just like, of all the Whitman tributes, to have the 52 sections of Song of Myself arrive in your inbox and just this beautiful music every week. I am also convinced, actually, and I've written about this, that Whitman had time in mind, right? Like like a section for each week in a year of contemplation. Yes. And that's what you afforded us with that music. But that said, it's not done, right? Like people should know that.
It is not done. I was continuing to do it. And then with the lockdown, I was not able to do any further concerts or productions, but I'm currently working on section 41. And so I'm really closing in on the last little bit.
But you have not worked chronologically on them, right? Like
no,
you started with 6. Oh, okay. So
except for that one, yes. And I must admit, I did do a little bit of 32 when I was in college. I set a section of that for a baritone who wanted a song. I think I could live with animals, but I didn't really commit to it at that point. So now I took it chronologically because I had the sense that he wrote it chronologically and that it has a chronological arc of enlightenment, for lack of a better word, and that enlightenment arc is important to experience chronologically.
And I think that anyone who knows your pieces knows that they're individually available. So people can just kind of find and choose. I think I agree that Whitman probably meant it to be read sequentially, but I've always liked that he thought later in his life of dividing it up into these sections. Because as you know, when he first published it, it was just of a piece. Yes. You know, that pretty much tells us that he had a big idea in mind there. And then only later, I guess, realized that there was something very pleasing and user-friendly about having the piece broken down into sections. Yeah. And thank God he did it, so we could have a Song of Myself marathon every year. So people actually, become very possessive of certain parts of it. It speaks to them.
We have our favorites.
Right. As you know,
broken up like that, you can have your favorites,
Exactly. And there, Whitman was smart about how he did it. And going back to our friend Greg Trupiano, you might remember Greg adored section 33.
I do know.
Which you have kindly offered during our upcoming June 6th Song of Myself Marathon. Everyone out there, you must come to this year's Song of Myself Marathon, whether you recite or not. And there are many reasons why. We actually got Roseanne Cash to recite section 52. She'll be there.
Oh my God.
Lenny Kay will be there, who's, Patti Smith's guitarist, but also, of course, a musician and cultural icon in his own right. But you
Wow.
also must come to hear Paula Kimper and Greg's
Laure.
partner, Lon Black,
And
perform.
Elaine will sing the sections of it that I have set to music. But honestly, that's so huge. I took excerpts of it and I'm going to go back after I'm done and finish writing it. But for instance, that's not likely a section anyone will pick to sing. Because of
That's
they'll pick the
true.
short ones, and they'll pick the more well-known ones, but it'll be there for the future.
Incredible. And just going back to our friend Greg, nobody wanted to recite section 33 for the longest time. For years in the marathon, I had to divide it up or, talk someone into it at the last minute. And finally, Greg was like, okay, I'll do it. And by the way, before he said this, he really didn't even want to take part in the marathon. He liked to be there and to listen, but he didn't want to participate. And he was like that. He liked to see things critically, not and absolutely, always part of the scene, but
Yes.
choosing. Whitman has some cool words about this, in and out of the game, but just sort of watching it at a distance. That was Greg. But then he finally got into section 33 and that was his section. So I'm so honored, Paula, that you and Elaine and Lon will take it over this year and just do a dedication to Greg.
Absolutely. I'm so thrilled to do it.
I've got to ask you, I know we're running out of time, but, just thinking about setting this huge poem, it takes us usually about 3 hours just to read it. So composing to it must really be a life's work. Do you have any stories about any particular difficulty or triumph? Is there some kind of notable thing that you noticed maybe about one of the sections, just because you're getting to know it even better than many of us know it?
I think I said that trajectory of enlightenment, it's always revealing that, and in the sections where I am now, it's as if he, was crucified and rose again, and I feel like, oh yeah, that's it. He's embodying that whole
Absolutely.
spirit. He's become the Christ in these poems. And I feel like that's a huge, huge message.
Was there anything when you were composing it that was really hard? Was there a difficulty that you encountered with any of the sections?
I wouldn't exactly say that. I mean, the long ones, like 13 is very long. And so it took months and months to get that one done. So it just feels like, oh, that's just so long. But then that's how I feel about 33. But you just keep at it. And it's like an opera. Keep at it and and eventually you did write that music. And then you feel like writing another one. And then you feel like writing another one. So
wow.
rest often.
I guess when you decide to do a section, what's your first approach? Do you study it? Do you read up on it first? Or do you just go with your own gut feeling about what he's saying?
I start with my own. I start by writing it down. That's part of my process of memorizing. And I think I showed you a little bit of that. I've got, this scratchy, I've got the poem on one side and I've got the scratchy first draft on the other with lots of erasures and corrections and things like that. And eventually, as I memorize it, the melodies start to attach and then they become more clear. And then I start to put them into notation. And then it's just that composition thing that happens where when I hear that it's right, it's right. If I hear it and it's not quite right, it's not right, I fix it, so it's just the process.
I love that because it's so organic. It truly is coming from your heart. And I don't know, have you ever encountered then reading about the poem and been surprised at the meaning of what you just said?
I've been using, what is it, the University of Iowa or something? They have a database about the song. I use that. And I find that those writings about that are very, they're inspiring in a way, because they're so academic. They come at the poem from a place where I don't come from that. You know, if there's a word or something I don't understand, I look it up and I see, oh, shouldering their hod. What's a hod? You know, or whatever. And so I've learned a lot of vocabulary in the process. And I do enjoy the academic interpretations of them as well.
But they are occasional. You're instead, and I think this is what I would love for the audience to—
They're not primary, let's say
right,
that.
to walk away with, which I think is so beautiful, that you are taking in the poem and you're just putting it out again for the world in a different form.
Yeah.
So beautiful, Paula. I mean, I'm so moved by this project. Is there, you know, I know Elaine is just about to join us, but before the grand finale takes place, if people want to know more about your work and maybe keep track of your songbook for Song of Myself, how can we do that?
Well, I have a website that's very simple. It's just my name.com, paulakimper.com. And I've put all of the Whitman settings, the first half, basically 1 through 26, are on there. But those are just lifted from my YouTube site, where I also have all of them, and some excerpts from my operas and other things that they can sample of my work.
So that's really nice that we can just go and hear the pieces. Are you hoping also to eventually perform all of them at the same time?
Well, that's yet to be seen.
Please do it. That would be so exciting.
It'll be my own yop.
Absolutely, a yop to end all yops. I mean, if you put them end on end, I guess you don't know because you haven't finished them, but I would imagine this would be sort of a Wagnerian.
4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we would do it in sections, because the way I've been writing it, 52, I divided it in 4, each 13 is a quarter, like a season of the year. So maybe that's the way I've been presenting them as well. The first 13, the second 13, the third 13 is ready to go whenever performances are available again. And maybe by then the last will be ready as well. So.
And if people are interested in that, they can contact you through the website also. We would love to get you back here in New York and hear, you know, now that things are opening up, just to hear these things, you know, sure, it's great to have them on YouTube and stuff, but oh my God, would I love to be washed over in Central Park or Prospect Park with this music and
I know.
Women in hand. So here is to all of us coming together and to what you have done to really make that happen, Paula. We're so honored to have you here. We're also really honored to have Elaine Valby, your partner, who happens also to be a mezzo-soprano, handily for us.
Yes.
Hey, Elaine. So good to see you. And thank you so much for joining us today.
I've loved this talk. Really wonderful.
Well, the subject matter was incredible, as you know. It's very hard for Paula not to be interesting, I think. But a few words on you, because I know that you are going to give us our incredible final moment with section 17. Everyone, Elaine Valby has performed. She's portrayed the high priest in Gilda Lyon's opera, The Walled Up Wife, and May Joyce in Darren Hagen's The Antient. Is it the Antient concert, or is that a typo?
I think he says ancient.
Okay.
Okay,
Ancient. I haven't seen it spelled with a T like that. That's interesting.
James Joyce.
She originated the title role in Paula Kimper's opera, The Captivation of Eunice Williams, and also played Sarah in the premiere of Kimper's first opera, Patience and Sarah. Woohoo! A favorite long-term project is Songs for Solo Dance and Voice, a collaboration with dancer choreographer Amy Pivar. Elaine, is there something that we should be watching out for you? Is there something coming up that folks should know about?
Just imagine how wonderful it is to live with this music as it's being composed. And to live with someone who's carrying those words and this poetry in her mind day and night. And then occasionally I come down to my piano and there's a new piece of music on there for me to get to be the first one to try to sing it through and hold these words in a new way. It's really wonderful.
Thanks, Paula. Thank you. I get to hear it separate from myself, which is an amazing thing.
What a gift and what a partnership. Elaine, thank you so much for joining us. And I guess we'll just end with this section 17, which you will be singing for us. And I think we want to end just with that because I don't want to talk about it. In the spirit of Paula Kimper, I think we should let it wash over us and take us into our lovely Tuesday evening. So.
All right, so I'm going to share the screen of the music. So those of you who can, sing along.
Yay, yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Okay. I got to do this whole screen. There we go. There we go.
These are really the thoughts of all men in all ages and lands. They are not original with me. If they are not yours as much as mine, they are nothing or next to nothing. If they are not the riddle and the untying of the riddle, they are nothing. If they are not just as close as they are distant, they are nothing. This is the grass that grows wherever the land is and the water is. This the common air that bathes the globe.
Oh my goodness. Oh, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone out there. That was Elaine Valby. And I saw, Paula, at the bottom of the notes that you did May 31st, 2018. Yay, Walt's birthday. Happy birthday, Walt. Paula, thank you so much for joining us. Elaine and Nathaniel, I know you're out there as well. This was such a joy. I truly feel so refreshed. And I'm hoping that we can all connect soon in person.
That would be wonderful. Thank you so much, Karen. What a great opportunity.
Oh, for us too. And thank you everyone out there for tuning in, to Jesse and Andrew behind the scenes who made everything happen. And please join us next month, June 22nd, when we talk about preserving 99 Ryerson Street.